Hello students, how are you? This is economics lesson video for grade 11, presented by me, Mr. Fitsumir Mias. It is for term 1, week 4 in lesson 4. In today's lesson, we are going to deal with the concept of market equilibrium. Students, do you remember what I've discussed in the previous session? We try to see the determinants of supply and the difference between changing quantity supply and changing supply. Let us briefly revise that. In the determinants of supply, we have listed a number of factors. Factors like price of the commodity, price of related goods, change in the factor price, objective of the firm, state of technology, and other relevant factors are there. All these factors determine the amount of commodity which producers or sellers supply to the market. The other part where the difference between movement along the supply curve or changing quantity supplied and shift in the supply curve or change in supply. Movement along the given supply curve referred as quantity supplied, changing quantity supplied. This is mainly resulted due to rise or fall in the price of the commodity itself. Factors other than price will remain constant during this time. And this results a movement along the given supply curve. There will be an upward movement in the supply curve that referred as extension of supply, or a downward movement, a contraction of supply due to a decrease in the price of the commodity. A rise in the price of the commodity result extension of supply, and that is an upward movement. In the case of shift in the supply curve or change in supply curve, factors other than price will be the main factor which result a shift or a change in supply. Price of a commodity during this time will remain constant. There will not be any change in the price of a commodity. But factors other than price result change in supply or shift in the supply curve. When the supply curve shifts to the right, it refers increase in supply. When there is a positive change, factors other than price. And when the supply curve shifts to the left from its original place, that refers to decrease in supply. When there is a negative change in factors other than price. That is what we have discussed in the previous lesson. Students, what is market equilibrium mean? What's in your mind? In the previous exercise, you have prepared a summarized note about market equilibrium. Without looking your note or the textbook, try to give an answer for the concept of market equilibrium. Pause the video for a while and do that. The concept of equilibrium. Before we directly go to the market equilibrium, what does equilibrium mean? The word equilibrium means state of balance. Then market equilibrium refers to the situation in which the quantity demanded of a commodity equals the quantity supplied of a commodity. There is a point that quantity demand and quantity supplied becomes equal. That is what means market equilibrium. At this point, we will have equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity. Equilibrium price is the price at which quantity demand of a commodity equals quantity supplied. It is known as equilibrium price. A price at this point will be referred as equilibrium price. The amount of commodity that is bought and sold at equilibrium price is called equilibrium quantity. The equilibrium price is the price at which the consumers are willing to purchase the same quantity of a commodity which producers are willing to sell. This is what means equilibrium price. It is a price which consumers are willing to purchase the same amount of commodity or quantity that the producers are willing to sell. Then at equilibrium, at market equilibrium, we have equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity. Clear? Good. In actual economic activity, equilibrium may never be actually realized. The central feature of equilibrium analysis in economics is the concept that economies tends towards equilibrium. The economic activities tends towards the equilibrium when no new force are acting on them. Clear? This is what we have the equilibrium concept in economics. It is not actually exist, but the economy tends to the equilibrium point. This is the market equilibrium illustration. Let us consider there is an imaginary market having large number of buyers and sellers of a commodity, say orange, and there is market demand and supply schedule of orange represented. And now let us determine the equilibrium point, the market equilibrium. When the price is 25, the market demand is 20 and the market supply is 1000. You can easily observe that there is excess supply. The higher the price, the higher will be the supply by the producer side. It creates excess supply. When the price becomes very high, buyers or consumers are demanding less. That's why we have less demand in the market with 25 birr. When the price becomes 20, now the demand increases slightly from 200 becomes 400 and the supply decreases to 800. Again, it also creates excess supply. It also creates excess supply when the price is 20. At price 15, demand and supply, market demand and market supply now becomes equal. This gives us the equilibrium point or market equilibrium. At price 15, there is equal demand and supply. Quantity demand is 600 and that is equilibrium point. The market equilibrium price is 15. When the price becomes 10, now it encourages buyers to buy more. When the price is low, the demand becomes very high. But when the price is low, that discourages producers not to produce or sellers not to sell that much quantity. The quantity supplied now become less than that of the quantity demanded at price 10. It creates excess demand. The lower the price, the higher will be the demand, and the lower will be the supply. It creates excess demand. Again, at price 5, the demand becomes now more. It's around 1,000, but the supply becomes 200. Again, there is also excess demand. Now, we can say that at equilibrium point, the quantity demand and quantity supply become equal. And this is the market price that equates the quantity demand and quantity supply. But whenever there is a price above the equilibrium point, producers will be encouraged or sellers will encourage to produce and supply more commodities. But in the other hand, consumers will demand less of a commodity when the price become above the equilibrium price. When the price become below the equilibrium, producers will be discouraged to supply more of a commodity into the market. But in the other hand, consumers will demand more of a commodity with low price. When the price becomes below the equilibrium point, that will discourage suppliers and encourage consumers to demand more of a commodity. This is what mean the market equilibrium illustration. This is the graphic presentation of market equilibrium. And now we can easily perceive the concepts related to market equilibrium with the help of this graph. It is easy to understand and perceive various concepts. Look at the point that represents the market equilibrium. At point E in the center, when the demand and supply curve intersect, that gives us the market equilibrium point. At this point, we have the market equilibrium quantity 600 and the market equilibrium price 15, as we have discussed in the previous schedule in the previous slide. This point is referred as market equilibrium. Any price above the equilibrium and below the equilibrium creates different condition or different situations. If the price is above the equilibrium price, we said that it creates excess supply or surplus, because when the price increases, that encourages producers to produce, suppliers to supply more commodities into the market. At price 20, you can see the amount of quantity supplied and quantity demanded. At price 20, the quantity demand is 400 and the quantity supply is 800. It creates excess supply. Whenever price above equilibrium, it encourages producers to supply more of a commodity. If the price is below the equilibrium point, again, take butane, the quantity demand becomes now 800 and the quantity supplied is 400. Any price below the equilibrium creates excess demand. Consumers demand more, but suppliers produce or supply less of a commodity into the market. This is what the market equilibrium illustration with graph. This is the mathematical analysis of market equilibrium. And there is an example. The example says, let there be 5,000 identical buyers of a commodity X in the market with an individual demand function of dx equals 8 minus px. This is individual demand function, but we have 5,000 identical buyers in the market, and there is 1,000 identical sellers of a commodity X with an individual supply function of Sx equals 20px. This is individual supply function, but we have 1,000 identical sellers or suppliers of a commodity in the market. Clear? Now we have to find the equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity. In order to do that, we need to have the market demand function and the market supply function. Here is the solution to find the equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity. In order to find the equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity, we need to have the market demand function and market supply function. If it is given the market demand function and supply function, we are going to take that as it is. But now we have a number of buyers and number of sellers in the market with individual demand function and individual supply function. So in order to get the market supply and demand function, we have to multiply the values with the number of buyers and sellers in the market. Now look at the number of buyers in the market are 5,000. We have 5,000 identical buyers in the market with the individual demand function 8 minus px. This is individual demand function. In order to convert this into the market demand function, simply we have to multiply 5,000 by 8 minus px, the individual demand function. And this will give us the market demand function, 40,000 minus 5,000 px. This is the market demand function. Now we have the market demand function here. The next step, finding the market supply function. The number of sellers in the market are 1,000. There is 1,000 identical sellers in the market with the individual supply function 20 px. Simply when you multiply this, you will have the value of 20,000 px. This is the market supply function. Now we have the market demand function and the market supply function. Once we get this, simply we are going to equate the two market functions in order to find the market equilibrium price. Demand equals supply. This is the way that we are going to put the two market functions. Demand equals supply. When demand and the supply become equal, that will give us the equilibrium price. If you remember from the graph illustration in the previous lesson. When you put these two, here we have the individual demand function 40,000 minus 5,000 px equals, and the market supply function 20 px. Now just put the price in the same side and find the value of P. That's going to be approximately 1.6. This is the equilibrium price. This is the market equilibrium price. At this point, we need to have the equilibrium quantity. Now simply substitute 1.6 on the place of Px. You can put that into the market demand function or in the market supply function. Substitute 1.6 in the place of Px on the place of price, and that will give us equal amount of quantity in the market, because this is the equilibrium price, the market equilibrium price. Once we get the equilibrium price, the next step is finding the equilibrium quantity. In order to find the equilibrium quantity, we use the equilibrium price in the place of Px in the demand function, in the market demand function, or in the market supply function. In the place of Px, we replace the market equilibrium price. Then it should give us same result whether we put it in the market demand function or in the market supply function. The result, the equilibrium quantity, should be the same. If it is a different result, the price is not correct that we compute earlier, it is wrong. It should give us same result when you put it in the place of Px in the market demand function or in the market supply function. Now we put 1.6, the market equilibrium price, in place of Px in the market demand function. The market demand function that we compute earlier is 40,000 minus 5,000 Px. When you put 1.6 in the place of Px or in the place of price, the result is going to be around 32,000. This is the equilibrium quantity. When you put 1.6 in place of Px in the market supply function, the result is the same, because that is equilibrium price, which gives us equilibrium quantity. Equilibrium quantity is the same for demand and supply. Clear? This is how we are going to illustrate or find the equilibrium quantity and equilibrium price with mathematically. Demand and supply curves do not intersect each other. When there are prospective consumers and producers of a commodity, but still it is not produced. It happens when the price at which producers are ready to produce is so high that the consumers are not willing to buy even a single unit of the commodity. There is prospective consumers and producers. Producers are not yet produced their product, but they are aiming that the product is going to have high price, that the consumers are not willing to buy even a single unit of a commodity. In this case, the demand curve and supply curve do not intersect each other at any positive quantities, because the price is very high that the producers are not willing to buy a single unit of a commodity. This creates demand and supply curve do not intersect each other at any positive quantities. But this may not be realistic, but this is the condition that demand and supply curve does not intersect each other. Let us see what it looks like. This is how it looks like graphically. The supply and demand curve does not intersect each other because it happened, we said earlier, the price at which producers are ready to produce is very high and consumers are not willing to buy even a single unit of a commodity. That gives us such kind of supply and demand curve. They will never intersect each other. As a result, the producers will not produce, and since the consumers are not willing to buy a single unit of a commodity, this shows the industry or the product is not economically viable. It will not be applicable and realistic. Clear? This is what means a demand and supply curve do not intersect each other. That's all for today. To briefly highlight what we have discussed in today's session, we dealt with the concept of market equilibrium. Equilibrium simply means a state of balance. Market equilibrium refers to a situation in which the quantity demand of a commodity equals the quantity supply of a commodity. At this point, we have equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity. Any price above equilibrium will create excess supply uh, because it encourages producers to produce more and supply more into the market. Any price above the equilibrium price will create excess supply, and any price below the equilibrium point will create excess demand. Whenever there is a low price, demand becomes very high. This is what we have dealt in today's session with scheduled illustration and graphic illustration. We have also dealt with the mathematical analysis of market equilibrium, how we are going to solve to find the equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity. Then finally, we briefly discussed about how demand and supply curve do not intersect each other. This is a condition that described as not economically viable. When there is a prospect, consumers and producers exist, and the producers are ready to produce the product with high price that the consumers are not willing to buy a single commodity. This creates no intersection between the demand and the supply curves. Economically, it is referred as not viable, or it will not exist in reality. This is the overall concepts that we try to see in today's session. Do this exercise on your exercise book. That's all for today. Until we meet in the next lesson video, goodbye.